one blast off. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, your weekly visit with two talking heads talking with you about the services, strategies, and success tips you need to make it big in managed services. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm Chief Analyst at Channel Mastered, the program or the company, responsible for this program. I'm also one of your two co-hosts. I'm joined this week, although not physically, by your other co-host, our CEO and Chief Strategist at Channel Mastered, Erick Simpson. Erick, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Rich, and I'm so sorry that I can't be with you right now as I had planned to, side by side with you remind us what event you're at, Rich?
So I am right now, the curtain people are seeing behind me if they're watching us on video is in a conference room at a hotel in Dallas. I'm attending the 20s Vision Conference. The 20 is, it's a couple of different things, but among other things, it's an MSP rollup, and they are hosting their annual conference in Dallas, as they do every year around this time. And it's a great opportunity every year for me to get in touch with the M&A landscape. They always have great speakers. We're going to have one of those great speakers actually on the show with us as our interview guest this episode. That would be Jay McBain. So a great place to be. And you wanted to be here. Things got in the way, and so you're participating virtually.
Thank goodness for technology, Rich. My fingers are crossed. Your Wi-Fi remains stable.
Yeah, so far so good. Why tempt fate? Let's put this behind us before the Wi-Fi has an opportunity to quit on us. Let's just dive right into the story of the week. And these are some, I'll call them half-formed thoughts. Erick, I've been here not even 24 hours at the conference. I've had a lot of conversations with folks, including Tim Conkle, the CEO of the 20, and others who are here. And a theme that has come up numerous times from numerous people at the show is what I'm kind of thinking of right now as the power of numbers. Now, I mean, if you are Tim Conkle and you are encouraging MSPs to get engaged with you, and if you're running a good company, to become part of the 20, to sell into the 20, if you are part of Evergreen Services Group or New Charter, or, any of these large organizations that are sort of amalgamating in various ways MSPs, you have something of a vested interest in the idea that it's difficult now and will get more difficult over time to go it alone as an MSP. At one point during the interview I did with Tim, yesterday, I sort of said, you go back a little bit in time, and there are MSPs out there who are maybe looking for an exit. They were looking for some place to sell, and they were considering all these kind of private equity and other options. There were the people who were maybe kind of looking to scale their business, and they were considering these options. And then there were a bunch of MSPs who were just sort of dead set against that kind of a route. They wanted to stay on their own. And that was really kind of the majority of the field. And I just asked him, from your perspective, are you seeing those percentages change? And he said he's seeing them change a lot. There's a lot more interest in among a lot more MSPs right now in finding some way to become part of something bigger than themselves. And I asked him, well, is that because there are so many of these big companies out there now and more coming along, and it's difficult and getting more difficult to compete with them? And he said that's a piece of it. But there are a number of other issues as well that are starting to get on the minds of MSPs and have them looking more seriously than they did before at becoming part of a roll-up or some other community, larger organization. And one of those is just the risk factor that, people are more conscious maybe these days than they were even in the past of the fact that you could spend 10 or more years, 20, 25 years of your life building something that is actually very valuable today, and you have one really bad security incident and it's all gone. Enormous amount of risk. You could have, a giant client, a customer responsible for 20% of your revenue go away, and all of a sudden your business isn't worth nearly what it was before. You could, and we've spoken certainly many times on the show, Erick, about the wisdom for smaller MSPs who are looking to compete. You want to specialize in a vertical industry, for example, as a means of maintaining your marketability and your relevance to your customers. Well, there's risks that goes with specialization too, right? As we saw in 2020, when any MSP out there, just as a for example, who was specialized in the hospitality industry, restaurants and hotels, suddenly didn't have customers, right? So there's a lot of risk out there. And then there is also the issue that more and more MSPs are becoming aware of something that we're going to be talking about with Jay McBain later in the show, which is just this whole AI question, which is just, do I have the resources in-house going it alone to apply AI internally the way these bigger companies are going to be able to, and leverage the efficiencies that they're going to be able to, and maybe even more challenging, to take AI to my customers and build solutions, bring solutions to them, be that AI strategic consulting partner to them. Can I do that and compete with these other companies that can't? And if I can't do that, what kind of competitive position am I going to be in? And so these are all questions. I'm not actually going to, encourage anyone in our audience right now. If you're going it alone, you are doomed. Get out of it. Find, sell the business, roll up, do something. But I do think, just based on the short time that I've been here and the conversations I've been having, that it is a good time to think about, from a longer term perspective, if you are not a year or two away from an exit, what is your strategy for going it alone, if that's what you want to do in this AI era that we're entering here? And what are you doing basically to build towards that strategy? How confident are you that that's going to work for you? Because I do think there are questions every MSP has to think about right now, not just in terms of the risk, not just in terms of competing with massive coast to coast MSPs, but around AI and what it's going to mean for you and for our industry and for the end users.
Yeah, Rich, I think this is a very salient and timely, story for this episode. We've all heard the adage, if you're not growing, you're dying. So not to put it in such bleak terms, but if you're just operating at your business at the same level, or maybe you're losing revenue, you're churning out clients, and it's more difficult for you to compete. You've got a big decision to make as a business owner. Myself, in several iterations in past lifetimes and currently, I understand that, if we're not innovating and if we are not delighting our clients with something that they haven't thought about before, if we're not teaching them and introducing new solutions to have them engage with us and increase our strategic and business value to them, then we open the door to competitors to come in. Right. So, again, like you positioned it, it's like, we're not saying, you guys need to do this or that, the other thing, but, my response would be more of a challenge. It's like, what is your plan? Just like you couched it, like, what is your plan if you're not exiting in the next 2 or 3 years to remain competitive, to grow the business? Because if we're not growing again, we could be considered dying. And if we're not increasing not only our top line revenue, but our bottom line profitability, that really negatively affects our ability to compete and to not churn out staff because they're getting better offers elsewhere, and things like that, and staying competitive and being strategic. Like, what is the next 3 to 5 year plan for the company? Ultimately, Rich, the partners that I've talked to, the MSPs, there is a small percentage that say, you know what, I'm just having fun doing what I'm doing. I'm enjoying it. I'm not thinking about an exit. But ask them 2 or 3 years later down the road, then their thoughts start to think differently, right? Because, like, if it were me, I'm like, I'm not somebody that's going to retire, but I want something new and different. I want a new challenge. I want a new project. I've done this. I've built this company. I want to see what else is out there for me. I have other interests. So it's it's a timely topic, and there's no confusion about the interest of a lot of folks wanting to acquire MSPs. I think I'm on every marketing list for folks that want to acquire MSPs and roll them up as anybody else. and I'm sure Rich, you see this as well, is like, and the partners that we serve and listeners in our audience, I know your inbox are getting flooded with, these emails of interest. So is it a distraction for you right now? And if it is, great, work your strategy for growth. But when you're ready, the decision has to be, okay, what makes sense for me? And am I going to leave this company to my employees and create an ESOP and sell it to them? Do I have family members that my kids are going to inherit the company? Or, am I going to engage with, someone like the 20 or someone else, and, and, and grow my business that way?
And I can confirm exactly what you were just saying before, Eric. And it's one of these very amusing things. As a member of the media, I go to lots of conferences like this one and register for them. And then the registration lists get shared with a bunch of people who use it for marketing purposes and just assume anyone who registered for the show is an MSP. And so I get inquiries from potential acquirers if I'm looking to sell my managed services practice, which of course is totally non-existent. So yeah, it's a very active market out there, even if you're not in it. But let's move on to your tip of the week, Eric, here. And this actually kind of circles us back a little bit. A few episodes ago, we had our colleague Ryan Morris on the show. He is our chief channel program strategist at Channel Master, the organization Eric and I help run and that is responsible for this podcast. We were talking with him about the evolution of partner programs. It was mostly from the perspective of the vendors and the thinking that they're doing around how they need to build and structure and design partner programs for today's channel. But your tip of the week has to do with looking at this from the MSP's point of view.
Yes, Rich, and you're exactly right. It was born from that very, very interesting and valuable conversation we had with Ryan just a few episodes ago. And I pivoted it to say, okay, well, what are 10 tips that modern MSPs, should look, how should they look at vendor channel programs? And I wrote about it in my latest newsletter. You'll find it on LinkedIn. So I'm going to pick 3 out of the 10, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit. So, the gist of the conversation with Ryan focused around the changing needs of today's MSPs. Like the MSP landscape, Rich, you can imagine, and because you've been in it as long as I have, is so much different than when I had my MSP and we sold it off in 2007. And so what is important to today's modern MSPs is different than what was important to MSPs even 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, right? So here's a quick 3. So the first one, out of the 10 that I cherry picked these 3 out of, I'll share today, is the need for MSPs to engage with vendors that reward not only sales outcomes, but pre-sales influence. And this was a really interesting part of the conversation, Rich, if you'll recall, that we had with Ryan, where he said, vendors should be thinking about rewarding MSPs along the journey for everything they do to create that sale, not just for closing the business. So this means that, we, as an MSP, putting my former MSP hat on for this part of the conversation, I am investing a lot of time, energy, effort, and money in creating sales, in the pre-sales motion, in the marketing, in the meetings, in the solution architecture of the design, in procurement after the deal is closed, and implementation and all that other stuff. So all of the things that happen before the actual sale is closed, which we typically get credit for in typical channel programs today, is kind of just performance, and maybe there's like a commission or a spiff or something like that, or a benefit. I want credit and some incentives and maybe some points towards these new modern channel programs. We even heard recently, that is really coming into play here, where vendors are thinking about adding points programs and more like a loyalty program along with everything else that are in their channel programs. That's what would be really interesting for me today. And so that's the tip number 1, is for partners to start asking about these types of incentives and looking at, and evaluating their partner program relationships from that lens. Number two, and I think this is one that every MSP would agree to, Rich, is I want enablement that matters. I don't simply want access to a partner portal and some sales slicks and just some online stuff. I want real enablement that matters from a vendor program. How can you help me as an MSP grow my business? Not how can you help me sell more of your product or service? Like what else can you provide me and my team in other areas of my business that we don't, we're now starting to see that, right, Rich? But when I was, in MSP, vendors were just, here, buy 1,000 licenses and we'll give you our best price. It wasn't, hey, here's our training. Come to a workshop. We will help you with marketing, with sales, with, pre-sales, with post-sales. We'll help you look at your finances. We join our peer groups, right, to help you build your business. All that is super valuable, especially when we talk about building company equity to the point that we just spoke about earlier, so that I can increase my potential for a higher offer at exit. I want things that help me build my company equity. And if your partner program doesn't help me do that and your competitors does, that's very, very compelling for me. And the third one is kind of one that's always been a high check mark on the scorecard for MSPs, is responsiveness from my vendor when things go south. How quickly do they prioritize my support? How quickly can I get access to a real person that can help me, rather than have to fill out a form or work through chat or just get in a long queue? And this even, goes towards onboarding. Like if I do join a new partner program, Rich, how long does it take me to get onboarded so that I can go to market and generate revenue for both of us in this relationship? It's not just me, the MSP, but my vendor partner that will benefit from providing me all this extra support and these critical things that I'm going to say on this program right now should be table stakes moving forward in many partner programs.
So three really solid criteria to apply, and as you said, that's 3 out of 10 that you talked about in this newsletter. We will include a link to that newsletter in the show notes for this episode here. By the way, you owe it to yourself to read the whole thing, but I want to focus in on the first two of those that you identified there, because we're going to be speaking to Jay McBain of Canalys in just a few minutes here. And as it happens, I wrote about this whole partner program issue in the most recent edition of Channelholic, my blog, and I included a slide from Canalys and Jay in that I wish I had in front of me and could share with the audience right now. But basically, Canalys went out to a bunch of partners and asked them, here are a bunch of different benefits that you could get from a vendor. Which of these is most valuable to you? And you can imagine what a lot of those options were on the list. And if you can imagine like a bar graph in your mind, all of them were getting roughly the same kind of number. And then there was this giant bar for one of them, and that was incentives along the entire range of the sales cycle, because partners out there now know that they are adding value, they're contributing to sales, they want to be rewarded for that work to a greater degree than they are. And more vendors are doing that. I think an even bigger number of vendors are aware that this is an issue, and we're beginning to see vendors respond to that by rolling out new partner programs, restructuring programs that find way, typically a points-based system, but there are other ways of doing it as well, where they will track and reward you for contributing in any of the many ways that you can actually contribute to a sale. But that is something you absolutely want to be doing business with vendors who understand the importance of that. And if they can't tell you today how they're dealing with that, they can tell you how they're going to be dealing with it really soon. And then the enablement that matters idea is, I think, really important as well, Eric. Enablement, like you were saying, I mean, training and education and enablement and all that. Nothing new about that from a vendor perspective. But for most of the history of that kind of stuff, it's really been oriented at that vendor's products and and whether it's selling them or supporting them, but it's really been oriented around the vendor and their products and enabling you to go out and be a more effective sales force for us. And what MSPs and others need right now is enablement from these vendors, just in terms of being a more effective business in all those different ways you were talking about. And so that the better vendors out there, and the ones that are the folks in our audience really want to be partnering with, are the ones who are invested in your success, not just in terms of helping you learn how to sell their stuff, but in terms of helping you learn how to run and grow your business and be a better MSP to your customers. And there are plenty of vendors out there right now who are doing that. And those are the folks you really want to be looking for.
Yeah, that denotes true partnership, that, that skin in the game, like we're helping each other grow, and we see where we can provide you more assistance in some of these areas because, Rich, MSPs are good at, the tech stuff typically, and so, we need that additional support and assistance and 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 provide it as inclusive of your program. Like, don't charge me thousands of dollars, right, to get that stuff. Make it easier, or make it attainable through some, through some way, through some MDF, or maybe there's a little bit of performance in there as well. So I think that there's a larger conversation that partners can have with their vendors to get the most out of the programs that they are subscribed to, that do deliver some of that stuff, but also for the vendors that they want to maintain a relationship with, that are maybe not, have not rolled out something like that. Have those conversations and let them know what it is that you really need to be successful. And, I'll bet a buck, Rich, that most vendors will listen. And also, last thing, that is a great article, because I read your article in channelholic.news. Let's post a link to that as well, so that we can give our listeners both perspectives.
Okay, you know what? You're on. We'll do that. We'll link to both of those, folks. But you know what? We're about to take a break. When we come back, without further ado, we're going to go straight to the main attraction. AI is raising a lot of big questions in our industry, and who better to go to for big answers than the man himself, Jay McBain of Canalys. When Eric and I get back from this brief break, we will be joined by Jay McBain to talk about AI and what it means for you. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, our Spotlight interview segment, where I am extremely pleased to be joined side by side with the one and only Jay McBain. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
I know for a fact Eric wishes that he was side by side with us as well. There was a point in time where it looked like that was doable, but logistics and life got in the way. But Eric is still available to join us here on the podcast. Jay, I can't believe I actually feel the need to ask this question, but for anyone in our audience who does not know you or what you do or where you work, just tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I've been in the channel for over 30 years now, probably 31 years. I count a lot of things about the channel as an analyst, but I had worked at IBM and Lenovo for 17 years. I built a piece of channel technology and software and raised money and did the entrepreneurial thing as well. And now I've spent pretty close to the last decade looking at our industry and looking at the system underneath it and where all the opportunities, the trends, and really underneath the covers of our industry.
Officially chief analyst at Canalys. Eric, I will have you know, one of the smallest of hundreds of things I learned during Eric's presentation at the show here was that Canalys is Latin for channels. Who knew?
That's right.
Now I understand the name. But Jay is really just coming off stage at the 20s Vision Conference, which I'm attending this week in Dallas. As always, a very interesting presentation. And I really want to kind of dive into the AI piece of what you were talking about there. So, there are people out there who are talking about AI as bigger than cloud, bigger than the internet, massive opportunity. You spoke about it on stage as a generational opportunity. I mean, put this into scale for the MSPs in our audience here. How big a phenomenon and how big an MSP opportunity are we really talking about here?
Yeah, this is the hype versus reality type of conversation, but here's how big it really is. If you look at the world economy this year, it'll be $115 trillion with a T. That's across 193 countries. It's across 27 industries. That's every dollar of value created in the world. The good news is 75% of that runs indirectly, so channels is a big part of it. But the numbers that we're hearing, for example, Microsoft talks about a number at $6.5 trillion around the TAM. And it's not Microsoft's TAM, the addressable size. It is actually the industry. That includes NVIDIA. That includes OpenAI. That includes all the MSPs in the room here. That includes everyone. So $6.5 trillion. His friend over at OpenAI, Sam Altman, talks about a $7 trillion build out. What's interesting about these really, really big numbers, because a lot of times when we have new trends and stuff, somebody just puts a really big number out there. But if you're following week by week in our industry, major governments like the US government committed $500 billion for Stargate. Then the government in France followed. And now all the G7 countries have committed over $1 trillion in real money, real time. You look at the Magnificent Seven, they have their earnings a couple of weeks ago. They're all spending hundreds of billions of dollars each. It's what's created NVIDIA as the biggest, most valuable company in the world. They just can't buy enough chips. Then you look at the Fortune 500, the R&D budgets for the big banks, the big, insurance companies, big pharma. And add it all together, we already have $2.5 trillion being spent right now. So I've walked from a world economy of 115, these big $6 or $7 trillion projections. We're almost to the point we got a third of it in. But this is the perspective. Our industry today, tech and telco, all hardware, all software, all services, all telecommunications in the world, all governments, all businesses spend $5.3 trillion. That took 50 years to build. So we're talking about an industry that's building now that's bigger than that. And we're talking about something that took 50 years to build that will probably take about 3 to 5 years to double in size. So the size and scale and real committed dollars is what's happening now. This isn't Internet of Things version 2. This isn't the metaverse version 2 or whatever emerging trend you want to take over the last 10 or 20 years. This is the next 20-year era in our industry after client server for 20 years, cloud for 20 years, and now we're on the front end. We're about 2 years into this next 20-year era.
Yes, Jay, it's I'm sorry I can't be there with you and Rich live at the event, but it's great having you back on the show. Thanks again for joining Rich live and me remotely, virtually. But once upon a time, Jay, you said that AI was going to be a feature in SaaS applications versus a solution that MSPs sell to their customers. Has your view on that changed?
So that was a prediction from 2 years ago, and it actually turned out to be 100% true. So what companies back then were envisioning is that, for example, Microsoft Copilot could get bolted on for $5. You could bolt on, for example, Salesforce Agentforce. You could bolt it on for a subscription fee. But that was back in kind of generative AI. We got our first view of ChatGPT, of Anthropic, of Gemini, of other tools. As agentic AI is taken off, one thing that's been assigned to it is a different procurement model. It's not going to be a subscription because agentic AI is designed to, in some cases, replace human workflows, human processes, human-led activities. So how do you charge a subscription if there's not a person attached to it? So what's evolved since then is what we call micro-consumption. What if it does an outcome, like has a conversation with the customer and delights the customer, and they charge you $2 for that? What if it goes off and does a process that humans would have been involved in the past, successfully does it, everybody's delighted, great outcome, and charges you $1? That's a version of micro-consumption, where I used to run a help desk at IBM with 1,200 people. The average call that came in was $30. So that was if it was a 10-second password reset or a 10-hour system rebuild. The average call was $30. Salesforce right now is getting ready to charge $2. So the question is, if you delight the customer in the same way, did you just take a 95% savings? So in an agentic AI model, it looks very different than consumption that the hyperscalers would use today, utility-based. It looks very different than subscription models, $100 a month per person. And it looks really, really different than traditional billing that telco and tech, had during client server days, where you buy everything up front. So MSPs are going to have to look at this model, think about the economics of partnering inside these models. But one thing we do know for sure today, that none of that's going to be resold. It's going to flow through marketplaces, and those marketplaces are going to have to come up with the compensation or incentive models that would have been margin-based in the past. And that's some of the big changes that are happening now. But talking about a prediction that came true is that, no, this is embedded in 250,000 SaaS applications now. I even look at the 261 channel software companies, the PRM tools and things. All of them have AI built in now, and I've seen their 18-month roadmaps. This is absolutely a feature set, not a product.
Jay, it seems like every week, every few days, I see another survey indicating a lot of appetite, a lot of interest among businesses in AI. They're struggling a little bit to get value from it right now. A lot of failed proof of concepts and a lot of skepticism about the value seen so far. But nobody's sort of backing away from the idea that this is going to be a strategically transformative technology for us. And so they are going to want to talk to MSPs and other solution providers about AI. And so we're 2 years into a 20-year period. I mean, for the folks in our audience here right now, to the extent that they are not able at some point within the next year or two to have a strategic conversation about AI with their customers, what kind of competitive disadvantage are they going to be at?
Yeah, I think we can probably compare this back to the early days of SaaS. If you go back to 1999 and the early days of Salesforce.com and what became a $400 billion SaaS market, every line of business executive started spending over half their time on technology, less than half their time on marketing, more than half their time on building a tech stack. If you are a CMO in this new world of SaaS, you've got major platforms like Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, HubSpot, but there's 15,348 other ISVs that sit on top of that 7-layer stack that you're going to be building. So each of these companies now have kind of AI built into them. And the conversation now with that CMO looks very different than just a IT conversation. It's not about infrastructure. It's not about cybersecurity. It's not about managing, a bunch of devices. First of all, CMOs don't care. Their outcome and what they get hired and fired for is building leads, building out MQLs that move into SQLs, and that's how they're measured. So the technology is layered in, and now AI needs to be layered in on how to do that better, how to be 10% better than your competitor. So in the early days of SaaS, because it wasn't resold, Salesforce got to 40 billion direct. And all the big SaaS companies only sold direct because it was a subscription software. Because it wasn't resold, for whatever reason, the channel didn't jump on top of it. They didn't see the $6.19 of services that come in every Salesforce dollar to get it to work, the $5.80 that come with every HubSpot dollar. So there were companies, and today Salesforce has 223,000 partners. They recognize that consulting about a Salesforce deal or to that marketing CMO is worth $1 for every dollar of Salesforce. So if they're going to buy $100,000 of product, I could go sell a $100,000 consulting engagement. I can then sell $100,000 design and architecture work. I can then go sell $100,000 in implementation and integration work. I can go sell, if you're a hyperscaler, you can go sell $1 of managed services. So you start to build out these $6 multipliers, and competing for rich services, both from profitability and stickiness, is where most of the channel that started collecting around SaaS companies was. These are the companies that got jump on AI, because explaining Agentforce or Now platform inside ServiceNow were the people already plugged into those line of business buyers and already doing those services before, during, and after the transaction. So it's very difficult to come in after the fact and build those relationships and have them. So I'm worried about this moment, especially the next 3 to 5 years of the 20-year era, which will be agentic. I'm worried about this moment.
So, Jay, do you have a forecast or a prediction of how much potential pull through of additional consulting services that MSPs might be able to generate? Maybe just getting their clients into maybe the very shallow end of the pool with Copilot and expanding to some agentic consulting services and work. How do MSPs play? How should they perceive this opportunity, or is it just too early to tell?
No, we have it mapped out till almost the end of the decade. It's a $158 billion opportunity for all services companies. That's the GSIs, that's resellers, that's digital agencies. There's 20 different types of partners that are going to compete. It's growing at 59.3% compounded. It's actually the fastest growing service opportunity in the entire tech industry, which is already the fastest growing industry out of all 27 on Earth. So it's the tip of the spear of growth. Being able to not only walk into IT buyers and talk about what you just said. Let's think through your workflows. Let's think through, processes and things like that. Maybe not at a business unit level, but at a corporate-wide level. But then let's walk into cybersecurity. Massive, AI inflection point in that industry. We already own that conversation. So when you talk about, dipping your toes, it's talking to the same buyer and doing things bigger, better, faster, cheaper by connecting to some of these tools that are out there, like Copilot and others that they might take advantage of in their product set already. So also not doing that for free. Looking at these models, and we get to write this research, which is the multiplier effect. It's $7.05 at Google. It's $6.40 at AWS. It's $8.45 at Microsoft. You got to look at this differently, that it's not a margin-based business that you're going to somehow, make a nickel off every Copilot conversation. You got to think about this. It's a multiplier opportunity. If I'm not charging, top dollar for my consulting, if I'm not building my skills and my certifications and my competencies to be able to charge top dollar and compete for that spot in front of the customer, this is where we could get edged out. If I'm, in there doing design work or implementation work, I got to be the best at that. And I got to compete with a lot of different people, coming from different kinds of businesses. So your relationship with your customer is the first thing. And managed service providers have some of the strongest relationships in the world because they're there every 30 days forever. It's not project-based. You don't come and go, a year here, a year there. You're there forever. It's a great time on the inside to own that business conversation, own the agentic conversation, and then land and expand.
Let's talk a little bit about agentic AI. It's come up a few times here, and we're certainly in the earliest days of that and where that's going to go. But already, as you know, you spoke at PAX 8's event as well. So already PAX 8 has a big effort underway to create an agent marketplace for its MSP partners. SuperOps just last week introduced an agent marketplace. We're starting to see marketplaces and distributors and vendors create these agent marketplaces built around the idea that MSPs at some point soon are going to start mixing and matching and weaving agents together into solutions that they are delivering to their customers. Is that something that you would encourage the MSPs in our audience to be thinking about, training for, building towards now?
Yeah, absolutely. We have recent research that, an MSP is not an MSP is not an MSP anymore. The average MSP checks 3.2 boxes. They're doing consulting, they're doing implementation work. They look like they're expanding their services beyond just the every 30-day recurring revenue that comes after the sale. One surprising number that came out of that is 44% of MSPs today are developing software. And in an agentic world, that's connecting the dots. And they're not building software to compete with Microsoft. Microsoft's probably layer 1 of the stack. They're building software to compete probably at layer 7. That last mile compliance, governance, whatever it could be, cyber. But that last mile, because they understand the customer the best, is the best place to flex these agentic muscles. And agentic AI will be built on these other platforms and the tech stacks that your customer has already invested in. They're not going to walk out and buy another product. And that's what we just talked about earlier. They're going to leverage what they have and the companies they're already working with and the investments they've put into the stack they already have. You're going to be the one that takes that and makes it work faster, better, more efficient, more effective.
Jay, today, these kind of MSP focused vendors like ConnectWise, Kaseya, Enable are really incorporating AI into their products and solutions to help MSPs become more operationally efficient and things like that. Do you feel there's an opportunity for them to do more in terms of how MSPs deliver and manage their end user solutions too? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's one of the other sides. If you read fiction or if you look at big magazines and stuff, the threat of 44% of all jobs are going to be replaced, and those type of things. But this has a strong linkage to MSPs as well. For the really, really strong MSPs, the most profitable ones are the most operationally excellent. They know every minute of the day. They understand their P&L. They understand exactly how the business operates at a systematic level. And then they start to understand the inputs and outputs to their business of what could be automated. And in the old sense, they were building RPA, robotic process automation tools, connecting the dots. They were building all kinds of tools within PSA and RMM world to do things, faster and more efficiently. But now conversational AI, and now this ability, to have access to the world's, information, you start to think about human replacements, not to reduce the size of your MSP, but send level 0 or level 1 work, to be more automated and to drive the education, training, certifications, and competencies of your group upscale. This goes back to that multiplier effect again. If I have somebody that would have been running around with a floppy disk, in the future, there's, not the sneaker net that we would have thought of in the early days of managed services. But as we go forward, we got to take our talent and make it the talent that your customer can't compete for. The whole reason that 82% of end clients today in the world, from a small flower shop to the biggest banks, outsource their IT, some or all of their IT, and growing that at double digits is because they can't find the talent themselves. They can't do it bigger, better, faster, cheaper than somebody coming from the outside. So we want to take this next era and make sure that we're up-leveling our team and making sure we're doing level 2, level 3, level 4 work. And I don't mean tech support, because a lot of that, again, is going to be automated. It's going to be the work that I just outlined in the multiplier. I have to be able to deliver a consulting engagement like an Accenture would, or a McKinsey or Bain could. But I'll do it in mid-market, I'll do it in medium-sized business where they're probably not fishing around. I need to deliver the design and architecture work that a more advanced company would be doing. I got to be there for the implementation integration, which is a lot more agentic work when you're connecting the dots, especially in headless software, which is part of the output of agentic, is getting rid of this subscription model, UI, UX based SaaS. You hear Microsoft talk about AI eating software. So it kind of changes the format of how, back and side doors are going to work in these agentic models. But we have to be the ones designing the logic and implementing the agents. And if it's Pax8 or if it's another bigger distributor, if it's with Microsoft, AWS, or Google directly, or one of the big SaaS companies, we're going to be working inside these platforms, always paving that last mile, which is what we've been doing for 44 years.
I want to go dive into pricing a little bit with you, because you were talking about outcome-based pricing, and that is sort of, at least initially, that's the pricing model most commonly associated with agentic AI. But there are also, and in agentic AI and beyond, there are all sorts of different pricing models that are being experimented with and talked about. I interviewed Tim Conkle, who's the CEO of the 20, the host of this event yesterday. And he, at multiple points, and I think he did it again on stage today, he's got this idea in his head that you can, as an MSP, you can go to your customer and you can say, I can demonstrate to you that this AI solution I'm proposing to you will cut your payroll 10% or save you 10% of your time. And the way I want to get paid for that is out of those savings. So if I'm delivering 10% savings, you give me 1% or 2%, and that's my lots of different ways to think about pricing these AI solutions. What models are you seeing as the most promising or interesting? Where would you kind of direct people to think about if it's going to be a different pricing conversation with their customers?
Yeah, so I would caution that advice for two reasons. One is yesterday, MIT, brought out by Fortune magazine, had a major piece of research in agentic AI and generative AI, and showing a 95% failure rate, where companies that are invested in these proof of concepts and other things are not seeing ROI 95% of the time. So I'm pretty sure in this early adopter stage, I don't want to be the one selling selling revenue share models on a 95% failure rate. The first 2 years of this model, this generative AI moving into agentic AI, has been disappointing for the industry from a financial perspective. If you look at the biggest companies in the world that you think would be the front end of this opportunity, which are the GSIs, working with the big banks, big pharma, big insurance, they're the Accentures and Deloittes and Capgeminis, KPMGs, EY, all the way down the list. They've had very disappointing earnings, and they've loaded up. Like Accenture has 760,000 people working for it. And among 20 companies, they have 10 million people there, kind of competing for this opportunity. Well, their earnings have been flat. So I would say that the first 2 years have been underwhelming. But like Bill Gates said at one time, we're going to be maybe underwhelmed for the first 2 years, but we're going to overestimate the first 2 years, but we're going to underestimate the first 10. And I explained kind of what's coming after agentic AI. But in this world, I'm not sure I want to jump in to that conversation. The only place I've ever seen it work is in procurement, where a company will be staring at an RFP, staring at a bunch of pricing, and it costs you $1 million. Somebody will come in like Accenture and say, hire us for our procurement services. And when we battle those vendors down to 900,000, we're going to share in that $100,000 savings. And so that's a little bit of if you could save me 10% further than I could do, and that's fantastic. And yeah, I'll give you a percentage of that. I'm not sure I want to set up a business model that's recurring, that's there earning the trust of the client forever on some sort of revenue share model that they now have to measure. And, may take 18 months to show any return. I would be going where the industry's going. The hundreds of companies have now come out with micro consumption models because they've been actively buying NVIDIA chips. Their boards, their investors on Wall Street are saying, you're spending all kinds of money. How are you going to monetize this? And the decision now is that these outcomes, they're going to be measurable. They're going to be, plentiful. And it's that micro consumption or utility model that it keeps hitting when you turn on the tap or you crank up the electricity in the house, same type of thing. I'm not trying to make margin on that. I'm trying to set that up where I can make the multiple on that. So while it is a model, I want to be at that basis where I'm selling services before, during, and after that. And when I can get it to a point to be repeatable, reliable, and scalable, now I can move that into my managed services and start charging that every 30 days forever.
That's exactly how MSPs like to play. So appreciate that. Yeah, that's some amazing data. 95%, Jay. So Jay, our next interview will be with Rania Sucker, the new CEO over at Kaseya. Is there anything you'd like us to ask her on your behalf, or maybe tell her on your behalf?
No, I was very public on LinkedIn and other places, and I think one of those posts went pretty viral, like 1 million views. But I talked a lot about and I used to work for Autotask. So I actually, early on in my career, I'm actually worked for Kaseya in one odd way or another. But I'll say that, this is a collection of a lot of companies. It's a collection of a lot of baggage. You don't have to go far into Reddit or other places to see that baggage. But it's a company that's in a high degree of change. And we were together at the Kaseya event, and we start to see a changing culture. We start to see, people at the top that, have been MSPs, that have kind of built some trust, that are running product and running different parts of the organization. We've seen them invest in communities, most recently Robin Robbins, but Gary Pika and all the communities that we would have known and loved in the early days of managed services. So as a company itself, she doesn't have to come in as an MSP. What they need is somebody who can take this company, evolve that culture to be, customer first, start removing some of this friction around their contracts and, some of their business practices and stuff, and, start showing this industry platform leadership. And one of the areas that I study a lot is platforms in cyber and hyperscalers and SaaS. What does it take to build those partnerships and alliances, integrations to be that platform? And she needs to take that into Wall Street and become a public company. Datto was a public company, came back out, but we need to educate a lot of non-tech people. This is Goldman Sachs, this is Merrill Lynch. One of the problems with Datto taking on the MSP ticker wasn't that it wasn't a great company and great community and everybody loved it. It was that no one that sat behind any of the 401k or pension funds knew what the heck managed services is. They had no idea that managed services is 1.5 times larger than the entire SaaS industry. Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, 250,000 companies. They have no idea that managed services is 1.5 times larger than the entire hyperscalers. Not just the big three, Alibaba, IBM, Oracle, all the way down. It's 1.5 times larger than these massive markets that have created trillion-dollar valued companies. And it's growing at double digits. But you walk down, the streets of New York and, ask people what does MSP stand for? And they wouldn't be able to tell you. So there's a huge education that along with ConnectWise, along with Ninja, who's got some great investments from, the founders of ServiceNow and Snowflake and great companies, and Enable and Halo and 20 others, all need to collectively raise the bar. If this industry is as big as it is, with 82% of the world's customers relying on it and growing at double digits in a tech industry that's grown at 7 and a world economy that's grown at 2, we need to shout from the mountaintops. And I think it's people that might be one step removed from being in those, little Holiday Inns in 1999 and, seeing the little industry form as it did, as we all saw it form. We need serious people that can build serious capabilities. And I trust that she's the right one to go do that.
Jay, as always, extremely interesting. There are lots of demands upon your time, so I really appreciate you carving out some for us here on the show. For folks who want to get in touch with you, want to keep up with what's on your mind, writing, and I'll point out one place they should go, 'cause like a lot of people, I follow you on LinkedIn, and every day or two you're posting something very interesting there. So find him on LinkedIn. Where else should people go to get in touch and stay in touch?
Yeah, so I go to bed every night with a zero inbox. The little red circles on your phone. I have none of them when I go to bed. So if you send me a Facebook message, a LinkedIn message, you send me a X tweet message, a million different places. I will respond, or I will somehow get you to somebody who can respond. I love this industry. I love the numbers, the system below it. I love seeing this be the fastest growing industry. I love how services are growing faster than the industry itself. The MSPs that we know and love and serve are the tip of the spear, for at least the next 10 years. And I'm just happy to kind of serve the industry as well. If somebody's looking for a number or looking for a key trend or something, I don't have a day job, so I can maybe connect the dot for them.
So for my sake, anything else, we're going to have you back on the show at some point just to have a productivity conversation. I want to hear how you get to zero with all these different people getting in touch on all these different platforms. I want to find out how that works. That is for a future time. For this time, thank you so much, Jay, for joining us on the show. Folks, Eric and I are going to take a quick break now. We come back on the other side. We're going to share some thoughts about this very interesting conversation with Jay McBain of Canalys. Fun, wrap up the show. Stick around. We're going to be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of this episode of the MSP Chat podcast. And truly, it is always a pleasure to speak with Jay. A pleasure and an education, and this time was no exception to that rule. Lots of places we could probably go based on that conversation, but the thing that's sort of sticking in my mind right now is just that while we're 2 years into a 20-year period, it's not as if the world is going to change around the folks in our audience tomorrow. There were several points in there where it became clear that if you're not moving now, if you're not starting to work your way into this next era, you run the risk of waking up one morning and being edged out, as Jay said at one point. If you're not kind of putting your roots in with the vendors as they go down the agentic route, for example, it's going to be hard to catch up later on. And so this idea, that we were talking about earlier on the show of having a plan, figuring out, what is your company's longer term plan for dealing with this AI era, and does it or doesn't it involve, joining forces with other people? What kind of skills are you adding internally? I'm forgetting now if it was 42% or 44% of MSPs, Jay said, are doing software development. They're coding, right? 44%, and you think, for years, I talked to MSPs and asked, do you do application development for your customers? And vast majority of them in the past didn't do that, weren't interested in investing in that skill set. And now we're seeing more and more MSPs realize that if I want to remain relevant to my customers, I'm going to have to help them start developing intellectual property. It's going to take more than the kinds of services I was delivering before. So again, we're not talking about stuff that you need to do tomorrow or next month, but it's going to take some time. And so I guess the larger moral of the story, of this week's episode, Eric, is begin investing now, investing in a plan, investing in a roadmap that's going to take you into this very promising future.
Yeah, it's just always a pleasure having Jay on the program, and his access to and immediate recall of these statistics really help us visualize the things a little bit differently than we may have, perceived beforehand. Like Rich, you and I we talk all the time on the show about AI and the impact to the channel and to partners and things like that. And, if I were to take, some guidance for MSPs from our conversation with Jay regarding kind of building some deliverables and some services around AI to their end customers, is simply don't get caught up into a pay for performance kind of an engagement or some sort of a revenue share at the end of it, because you cannot control what you cannot control. You can only control what you deliver. To hear the statistic that, the 95% statistic that he shared about, AI projects not returning on the investment and things like that. So, do what you do best, scope out, a project, make sure that you have good change management and risk control and invoice for change and deliver, on that business outcome. This is not speaking, Rich, to say we're going to position it as a typical project. We're going to pitch it and present it as the positive business benefit that the organization receives. Jay even, touched on that, and you and I have talked about this, is moving from kind of technical outcomes, or we'll just say AI outcomes here, to more of the business impact on the overall business, not just a business unit, like Jay said. So that's the tip I took away for MSPs. And for vendors, the tip that resonated with me was like, hey, we got to do better as a group of vendors leading this channel, which is, the fastest growing, highest revenue generating segment of the industries, that run the world. 84% of business owners are outsourcing some component of their support and technology to MSPs. So MSP vendors kind of, hey, we've got to get to that next level. Rising tide lifts all boats for our channel and for the partners that help us grow our channel.
Well, before we move on, Eric, I'm going to take our audience behind the scenes a little bit, just to give them an extra little sense of how impressive that conversation with Jay was, because he actually flew into the conference here in Dallas today from his home in Florida. his flight this morning was delayed by 3 hours. So he spent 3 hours on the tarmac at the airport in an airplane that did not have the air conditioning on. He got here 20 minutes, I believe, before he had to go on stage and deliver something like a 45 or 50-minute presentation. And then immediately after he came off stage, he came into the room with me here to do this podcast appearance with us. Briefly, very briefly before we started recording, he ate his lunch, which was one of those little bite-sized Almond Joy bars. It's been a heck of a day for Jay, and yet you would never know it. As you said, the numbers were at his fingertips whenever he wanted them. So kudos and thank you to Jay for joining us here on the show. And folks, that leaves us with time for just one last thing. And we've certainly spent enough time on this episode talking about AI, and yet it turns out, Eric, there are apparently a lot of people out in the world who have yet to discover Google. Because I'm looking here at a story from just a few weeks ago out of New Delhi in India, where a fraudster was arrested by police there. He had been posing to various business people in the community as a diplomat associated with a foreign country, the embassy of a foreign country, and he was arranging various fraudulent business deals, walking away with reasonably large sums of money. But he was presenting himself as an ambassador from, in various cases, the nation of Saborga or Westarctica. Very interested in doing business with these people. And, I could imagine if somebody does a convincing case of presenting himself as a diplomat and you're looking for overseas business opportunities, you might want to take that meeting. But if you hadn't heard of Westarctica before, you might want to look it up before actually going into that meeting. And then you might get a little suspicious if you show up to the drab little residential building that was apparently posing as an embassy where this guy was doing his meeting. Do your homework, folks, before you're going to meet with a diplomat.
Yeah, I've been trying to reach out to those folks that got defrauded to introduce myself as the exclusive distributor of Unobtainium, Rich, and so far no takers.
Well, maybe people are wising up. We can only hope. And folks, that is all the time we've got for you this week on the show. We'll be back in another week's time with another episode for you. As we've already hinted, that one will feature an interview with Rania Sucker, the new CEO at Kaseya. So looking forward to that. And I will actually be recording that with her tomorrow morning in real time here at the Vision Conference. But until then, I will simply remind you that this is both a video and an audio podcast, which means that if you are watching us on YouTube, but you're into audio podcasts, you can go to Google or Spotify or Apple, wherever it is you get your podcast. You're going to find us there. If you are listening to us now, but you'd like to check us out on video, go to YouTube, look up MSP Chat. Wherever it is you find us, please subscribe, rate, review. It's going to help other people find and enjoy the program as much as you. This program is produced by the great Russ Johns. It is edited by the also great Riley Simpson, both of whom are part of the team with us here at Channel Master. They can help you create a podcast if you'd like to do that. And podcasts are only one of the smallest little bits of things we do for our clients at Channel Master. To get the whole big picture, you want to go to www.channelmaster.com. Channel Master has a sister organization. It's called MSP Master. That is Eric working one-on-one with MSPs to help them grow and optimize their business. And you can learn more about that at www.mspmaster.com. So once again, we thank you for joining us. We're going to see you in a week. Until then, folks, we will leave you with the bit of wisdom that we always do every week here, which is just to observe that you cannot spell channel without MSP.